Welcome to Symplicity Conversations, the podcast where business, culture, and community come together to inspire and empower. I'm your host, Catherine Ripley. Each week, we'll explore meaningful conversations about how today's business landscape is shaped by innovation, relationships, and the people behind the progress. From actionable insights and stories from industry leaders to topics like customer experience, fostering strong business relationships, and the role of automation, we've got you covered. Whether you're an entrepreneur navigating growth, a leader focused on building lasting connections, or someone interested in how culture and community drive success, Symplicity Conversations is here to guide you. If you're ready to turn challenges into opportunities and make meaningful strides in your business and community, subscribe now and join the conversation. Get ready to simplify complexity and make an impact with Symplicity Conversations. Welcome to Symplicity Conversations, where we explore the intersection of business, leadership, and community. I'm joined today by Rene Nutter of ABT Global, and she's in the TSPI division. She's a dynamic leader with a wide-ranging background in government practice and public and private collaboration. Funny enough, we met at the Minneapolis airport, proof that great conversations can take off anywhere. I love the take off anywhere. So excited to have you here. But first, let's go ahead and start with our Symplicity Insights, or our famous quote of the day. And today, I think it's perfect. It comes from Oprah Winfrey. Do not bring people in your life who weigh you down, and trust your instincts. Good relationships feel good. They feel right, and they don't hurt. I love this quote. I love that they selected this one from you. So be sure to subscribe to Symplicity Conversations to hear from more leaders shaping the future of our business and community. So Rene, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I can't wait to tell our story because we just met. We just met in an airport a few weeks ago. Isn't that crazy? I feel like there was some divine intervention that we were supposed to meet. So I was flying back from a trip in Napa I was there, and we met standing at the gate coming back from Grand Rapids, or to Grand Rapids, and I saw this awesome individual that I love, Cynthia Kay. I've met her. I've known about her for a long time. She's an incredible business leader here in West Michigan, but she's a entrepreneur emeritus at the Edward Lowe Foundation that I've been working with for 9 years. And so you were standing with her, and I walked up and said, "Hi, Cynthia," and we reconnected and we're talking. And I just made the assumption that you were with Cynthia, that you were friends. And, we were talking about my business, and, we introduced each other and was like, "Oh my gosh, you've got government background. We should really talk because I'm growing a government practice." And here, we met at my office, a week or so later. And I'm like, "So how long did you know Cynthia?" And you're like, "Just met her on the airplane." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. You just met her that night on the airplane, and now you just met me, and here we are, talking about how we can collaborate, and now you're on the podcast." So I just feel like there's a divine intervention there.
Some of the most amazing people I've met on airplanes or in airports.
Yeah, you were telling me that somebody you were talking to says, "I never talk to people on the airplane. I just want to get in my chair and put my blinders on, and please don't talk to me." Sometimes I do feel like that, depending on the flight. But you make it a practice to talk to people on the airplane. Tell me a little bit about that story.
Sure. So I actually think that everything that we do in business, whether it's public sector or private sector, is all about people, right? Mm-hmm. People want to do business with people they trust, people that they like, that they can talk to.
Right.
And if you're on an airplane and sitting next to someone and they give you that, "Hey, I'm just into this vibe. I want to read this book," whatever.
Right.
You kind of know, and
Leave them alone.
Leave them alone, right? But if you start up a conversation, 9 times out of 10, they'll talk about what they do or their grandchildren or their children. And I've met people, one guy, for example, that electrified school buses. And that was his business.
Wow.
Taking old diesel school buses and just retrofitting them to be electrified. So they'd run on electricity.
Wow.
Super exciting.
And I think you did something with that. You were able to say, wow, I like that. That aligns. And then you took that further. So he was able to do
to work with some of our environmental folks in our natural resources division and talk with them and go from there. So it's like those little connections. When I got back to my office after we met, I talked to one of our technology guys. I'm like, I want you to meet Catherine, and told him a little bit about your business. And I was like, oh, you have to meet her because he does similar things with like brokering software and cloud
cool.
and et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. You never know. I think that's the point of talking with people and meeting people and networking is you don't have to have any expectations. You just have natural, like, oh my goodness, I think you could help this person over here. Or, just having, creating a friendship out of it, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like we had this really small window because you're moving out of West Michigan. You're moving to Washington, D.C. with your role. And I feel like, wow, we just had this little window, but the people were like, you just got to meet before you take off, before we miss that window. So watching for opportunities, I think, is important in life, right?
Exactly.
This almost has nothing to do with business. It's like we were just meant to be connected, and now we've had, this time together before you leave the area that, we're gonna really, get to know each other, and I think it's exciting to see what could come of these relationships that we create. Oh. So tell me a little bit about your career journey and then what led you to your current role and what you do today.
So I don't think I ever had like a straight path.
That's a good thing.
I actually started school in culinary arts.
Wow.
And I thought I was going to own a bed and breakfast with a little specialty restaurant, and I would be the chef du jour and sharing the menus. And then after I graduated, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I'm like, there has to be a better way. And hospitality is a whole different culture, right? Like you're working when everyone else is playing. And
right.
I was like, so I went to grad school and got an MBA, and then started working in the public sector. Wow. I worked with Department of Labor, was a contracting officer with the contract with Department of Labor. And then moved into some adolescent training, and then that kind of just morphed into government contracting and consulting. Wow. And before this position, I was working more in research and evaluation, and then moved over to the business side and developing relationships with clients and potential partners like yourself, and looking at like where can we create some of these opportunities and go after some of these contracts. Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah. It's a different, you and I seem very similar, where we have these very distinct chapters where, okay, I was a legal secretary, on this path, but then I knew I needed to go to college. And, if I wanted to change my life, I wanted to, I needed an education and a degree. And then I had, again, very different chapters that, and today in technology, I was in marketing. I was in very different industries. But I think that builds character. It builds, being able to change and grow and respond to, what we like to do. I mean, this is the 19th year of my company, and I love what I do. Thank you. I love what I do. And starting a government contracting practice, I had a gentleman on my team that was in the Marines. So he spoke the government language which is just a lot of acronyms, right? Yes. But he kind of understands being on the government side, because I think there is a different language when you're interacting. There's just different how you navigate versus the commercial side, right? So Victor and I, for 2 years, we got our capability statements written. We worked with our local PTAC office that has now become Apex Accelerators. Those are through, they try to help you figure out how to work with government, right? They give you guidance, but it's still up to us to go figure that out. So we made sure, and it was funny because I knew I needed my Woman Business Enterprise certification. And it was something that way back when I pulled out my folder and was like, yeah, I've had this application for 12 years. 12 years before I actually applied and got my certification. And I went, wow, I've been wanting to do that for so long, but I didn't have the right motivation because it's really a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of work every year to renew your application. So we had this like dream of this is what we want to do, but we really didn't know how to do it. We knew that we could respond to RFPs on these different websites, BidNet and SAM.gov and, different things like that. But it wasn't super realistic, right? So we ended up hiring Carla in June of last year. So she's been with me, 9 months now. She speaks the language. She has a network. She's been living in that space of selling to the specifically federal government, which is even very different than state and local government. But, Victor and I very quickly in our 2 years said, we can't do this. We're not responding well to RFPs. We don't know how to put these packages together. So we've kind of been growing since Carla joined us. And we've done some pretty cool things, like we've submitted for NASA Soup 6, and that's going to go through all its delays and everything, But
Protests.
Yeah, protests and all this crazy stuff that happens with the government. But I really saw that in technology, the government's a little bit behind. They're still using a lot of premise equipment, and they haven't quite gone to using cloud based technology, like for phone systems, for example. So I wanted to do a lot of the heavy lifting now before they were hair on fire trying to change out all these premise solutions. I felt like, gosh, Victor, if we could just figure out how to speak the language and how to do this and how to navigate, when they are ready, we're going to be there and we're going to be familiar. So that's kind of been our, it'll be in June. Actually February, it has been 3 years that Victor and I, the first 2 years, and then this last year, we brought on some help to really kind of help us navigate that. But we've got a little bit of deals that we've won, but I can tell that we're finally starting to gain traction of how to navigate it. But it's different working in the public sector, for sure. So I'd love to hear about some pivotal moments that shaped your path in the public sector industry.
I don't know if it was moments per se.
Yeah.
It was definitely people. And meeting people who provided like an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Because you talked about like the different chapters in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Well, each of those you could probably tie to a person, even if it's yourself, but another person who introduced you. Hey, did you think about government contracting, right? And it was someone who got you thinking about that. And I think for me, each of the changes, I could go back and just say how amazingly fortunate I was to meet people who are like, hey, Rene, let me show you this.
Yeah.
I think you'd be really good at this. Why don't you try it?
Wow.
One opportunity, the reason I got into government contracting after the public sector, so I was working with Department of Labor, and I was downstairs in a conference room, and there was a contractor, and then I didn't really know who they were, but I saw they were struggling with getting their equipment set up. I said, hey, can I help you all with something? Because I knew they were going on first thing in the morning. And they're like, yes. And 2 years later, he offered me a job. He owned a small company in Houston who did research and evaluation for the government. And he's like, I've been wanting to hire you since you volunteered to help us.
That's so cool.
So,
again, it's those moments where you meet somebody and you go, okay, this is supposed to happen this way, right?
Right.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of people associate big events, milestones with, I got my degree. Right. So therefore I had this milestone. I got this accomplishment, In fact, I just had this accomplishment. I've been working for 12 years to get to the platinum level at Intellisys. And now that you say that, reflecting back, wow, it wasn't actually just getting to platinum. It was the people. Like Brandon Smith was my first channel manager at Intellisys. And I said, Brandon, I want to get to platinum. And he goes, great, let's do it. So I feel like making Brandon proud of my accomplishments. And when I got there, I was actually told in front of Brandon that I made it to platinum. And that was the most special part about that accomplishment, was that Brandon witnessed the beginning and the achievement. So I haven't thought about it that way, but that is really interesting to think about, tying things to people instead of the actual act itself, right?
Right.
Wow.
I think I shared with you, I have a daughter graduating high school this year.
Yeah.
And, that whole junior year, you go through all those things about, what am I going to do with my life?
Right.
And one of the things that I emphasize with her is the degree opens the door.
Right.
But your grit and your character are what keeps you inside the door.
Yeah, that's so true.
And so it's the people that you connect with, your character that, to your point, right?
Yeah. So what piece of advice would you give to someone for their career that you would have wished somebody would have told you earlier?
I want to share one piece of advice that I have carried with me forever. And it's not necessarily career per se, but my econ professor, way back when I was 20, whatever, said to us, I don't care if you make $200 a week, put 10% of that in a savings account. And no matter where you go, 10% of what you make, put in a savings account. And that piece of advice, as almost a 57-year-old person, has really made a difference in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I wish, when I talk to people about that, people my age are like, oh, I haven't really even thought of retirement. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And just that, but I do want to share that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about going back, if someone could have told me just how important people and connections were, and just really cherish them, because I think of some of the people who were advocates or champions for me in the past.
Yeah.
They've died since, and I really wish I had said, thanks, Forrest. It was because of you that I tried this. And
let's talk about your current role. What does your day-to-day look like? What are you doing today?
Well, a podcast.
There you go.
But a lot of what I do in business development really is connecting with people. We talk about hunter-gatherers. We hunt for the opportunity, and then we gather the partners to help us secure the opportunity. And that's really, yesterday, might have had like a series of meetings, and it was either with potential clients or potential partners, and working together to find that team that's going to be better than anyone else that competes for that contract.
Yeah. So what's the most exciting project or initiative that you're working on right now?
I would say it's like a collection. And I think it's super exciting where we're going in technology. And I look forward to seeing, like, we hear AI everywhere, right? Like, it's ubiquitous. Everywhere you go, AI. But if you were to ask someone, explain to me what AI is, there would be 100 different definitions probably, because it's people don't really have a grasp on it. Kind of like the internet,
right?
way back when. And so I think for government contracting, right, the government's never suffered from a lack of data, but they have suffered from how to best use the data. And we're coming into a period where we're going to be able to use all of that in a very different way.
Right.
And I think you were talking about like even making systems more efficient by analyzing the metrics when someone calls into a help desk. And do I call into the help desk from 6 to 9 with more complex problems than I call generally from 12 to 4 because I just want to talk to somebody. I'm at home, retired.
Right.
And being able to use that kind of, I think that technology is extraordinarily exciting for where we're going in this next part of the development.
So how do you think government contracting, or working with federal agencies differ from private sector engagements?
I think you alluded to it earlier. You have to know all the rules. You have to know the vocabulary. You have to know that section L and M are probably the most important part of the RFP, and you're addressing that in your proposal, but knowing that, and that's a whole process, right?
Right.
As you've found out over the last couple of years. And in private sector, I just bought a condo in DC. Contract is not much room for changes. The language is the language. But in government contracting, you have to know what that language is and where you can push and help the client develop the scope of work and meet their needs, like really helping them define where is it that you want to go. Here, let me help you, and we can change that language and the scope of work to match.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges or even opportunities right now with government-related work? There's a lot going on in the government right now.
Like
a lot of unknowns.
A lot of unknowns, changing every day. And I think isolating what is it that this administration, what is their end game? Where do they want to go? And helping them in the process understand that federal contractors want to support that. And it's not a contentious relationship. It's a supportive one.
Right.
And contractors have been there to help fill those gaps for the government decades and decades, right? And help, and just finding out what are your objectives and understanding that there may be a lack of training right now. And I think they're going to find that fairly soon. And they're going to need government contractors to help fill that void to meet some of their objectives. Right.
I feel like people have come up to me saying, oh my goodness, you're starting a government contracting practice. But look what's going on in the government. I'm like, the government is still going to spend money. It's not going away. They're not going to stop spending money. They've never stopped spending money, no matter who is in office. But I think it's just a matter of people and who you meet, how you navigate, knowing yourself and what your capabilities are. I mean, we create these capability statements, right? And so we need to make sure that we're showing up, and when there is a project that we bid on, that we can deliver. I think that no matter who's making the rules or the changes that happen, it just comes down to, here's a project that has to get done. I mean, we're in technology. We have to keep evolving technology, whether it's for cybersecurity reasons, whether it's because the old technology is so expensive and outdated, and to keep it updated and patching, servers, and it's just a lot. They still have to evolve, even if administrations change. So it hasn't scared me, that we're starting a government contracting process. It's like,
it's exciting.
It's exciting. There's opportunity, especially amid chaos, when people are like, oh my gosh, what can I do? How can I help? We just partnered with an 8A down in Florida. We met them at the 8A conference when we were in New Orleans. Carla and I went. There's opportunities for us to, support. He's going in. We can offer technology and work with him under his 8A. I think there's lots of opportunity. I think it's all meeting people, and now just, when somebody needs something, be able to raise our hand and say, we can do that. We can help. we can respond to that RFP and then responding with an organized response that, is quality, and they can see our quality in that. That's what I think. That's why I'm not scared. Like we're growing a government contracting practice, and there's not many agents that sell to especially federal government. They might have a state or local government that they've had for years, but they've sold phone systems to. But to have a real practice where we're going after, and that's unique in the industry. And I love being unique.
Well, and federal employees are going back to the office, right? And there's going to be requirements for that. And those phone systems haven't been touched in like 4 years in a lot of places. So, I can see lots of opportunity there.
Yeah, lots of opportunity. So what do you think are some of the major industry trends that are shaping the work that you do?
It's definitely technology, right? And some of the points that you hit on, higher security, cybersecurity, just security in general. If it doesn't make the U.S. more secure, more prosperous, like we have these tenets that have been put forth, and really focusing on those as we do our work. And I just want to get back to knowing what the objectives are for the administration and having potential solutions for them and helping them work through that to achieve those objectives.
That's just like on the commercial side, knowing what the corporate goals are, and even down, no matter how large the organization is, every person has to be leaning in that direction. If you're doing something and your goals are against what the corporate goals are trying to be, that's not going to work. It's only going to last so long, right?
Right.
So I think that you're spot on that. What is this administration goals, and how can I go in that direction? Regardless of how you feel about the administration, it's there for 4 years. So we've got to, do our job and support that direction until we have a new direction.
And who's going to disagree with being more efficient?
Right.
Or being more secure, or being more prosperous.
That's right.
I don't think anyone, I think that's the common area we can all kind of get on board with.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership and mentorship. So have you had a mentor in your career?
Probably several. And kind of what we were talking about earlier about at each one of those stages where I made a change, it was because an advocate or a champion or a mentor that came along and said, let me show you this, or I can see you really excel in this area. Have you thought about? And I think it has been those champions that have helped me through sometimes really difficult times and to move to the next chapter, and then other times just the next level.
How do you try to, especially women in technology, we're in a technology field, and it can get pretty lonely in that, with sometimes we're the only female at the table, right? Or we're the only one on the panel. So what are you doing to try to help encourage younger women to go in the direction of technology?
That you asked that question. Coming from the APT division, where it was predominantly research and evaluation, it's predominantly women.
Nice.
And then going to the technology division, predominantly men. And I found that just when I was starting my career, being at the table, being in the room, right? Hamilton, being in the room,
right,
and speaking up and not being afraid to speak up, and encouraging particularly early career women, that's okay. And so if you say something and it's incorrect, that's all right. You're in a supportive environment, and I'll be right there with you. But making it okay for them to use their voice. And
that sounds like great advice. Is there any other advice you would have for women looking to get into tech or even government roles? What would be some advice that you would share?
Go into it because you're interested, right? Find the part of technology that really interests you. I'm sure you didn't go into upgrading and modernizing telephone systems because you didn't find it interesting, right? There was an aspect of it that was really fascinating. You're like, I can make this better. And I think with technology, like even with my own daughter, she's like, well, I'll go do this because it'll pay a lot of money. I said, no, you're not going to do that because it's going to pay a lot of money. You need to find what you like to do. And there's aspects of technology, no matter where they are, that are really fascinating. You need to find that part.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I think that people, at the end of the day, when I look back on my journey, at the end of the day, it isn't about how much money you can make, right? It's about how do you feel along the way?
Right.
How did the journey make you feel? And there's milestones for sure, but between milestones, you got the messy bits, right? The everyday, the things that go right, wrong, and ugly, and you got the messy bits. And so I think that young people have these aspirations, especially somebody that's like, I'm going to do this. Here's my plan. This is the way my career is going to go. And then you go, that's not how it goes. I couldn't have planned my career and the twists and the turns. It kind of reminds me of a roller coaster where my sister, probably 15 years ago, we went to a theme park. And I'm not a huge roller coaster person, but she's like, come on, Kat, you're going to go on this roller coaster with me. And your feet are dangling. It's one that you're sitting in the seat. You got this thing around you and your feet are dangling. And I'm just like, this is not safe. This is not going to be good. But it went up these hills, down and turning and flipping me upside down. And I was screaming. I think it was one continuous 2-minute scream, if that's even possible. But my sister is laughing at me the entire time. And she's my older sister. And she was just laughing that I was like, responding to this. But sometimes I think that's the way our life is. We're on this roller coaster and it's like speeding through these hills and twists and turns. And it's loads of unfair, beautiful moments, right? But it's like, I think that if people can just trust in, the tenets that they have, like working hard, like I just want to work hard. I want to do the right thing. I want to press forward. And you watch for the beautiful moments of meeting people that you don't know where that's going to go, but you know that, man, it was really cool to meet this person and see where this can go. We experience a lot of that in Inforum, where we meet people and make connections, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, 10 years later, they're a dear friend, right?
I've known this woman for 10 years. Exactly. It started in an airport.
Yes, exactly. So I think that younger people getting in, they just need to dive in. They just need to speak up, even if they make a mistake, even if they say something wrong. What they did was speak up, and that taught them that it was okay. Even if somebody laughs at them, that's a stupid answer. Okay, that's their problem.
That's a you problem, not a me problem.
Exactly. Yeah. That person tried at least, even if it was off. So I think take more risks. I would love people, younger women, take more risks. We always think about if there's a job description or a job opening put up there, if a man has 10% of the qualifications, they're all for it. Hey, that job's for me. I'm going to go grab it.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Exactly. Women, boy, they could be 100% qualified. Well, do you think this experience is good enough for that? I'm like, the role was made for you. But they question themselves and they don't throw their hat in the ring. And I would love for people to just, male or female, just to try it. Like, dive in. If you want to try something, dive in. If it doesn't work, pivot, right?
Pivot.
Do something different. But I think the regrets that we have as we're in our, 57 years is the things that we didn't try, the things that we could have done, and it could have taken us down a path. I think about how I started Symplicity, and I was pushed off the cliff. I was the first person in my family to go to college. We certainly didn't sit around and talk about when I was young, starting a business. Oh, you can start a business. We didn't talk about that. But now that I've done it, I'm like, oh my God, I was made for this. This is what I was meant to do. And you talk about the advice or suggestion you give to your daughter, find something that you're passionate about, because when you are, you don't work.
You don't work, right?
Right? So the younger people need to find things that really excite them about work.
Something that you don't wake up in the morning and go, oh. You wake up and you're like, oh, let me look at my calendar. Let's see who's on my calendar today, right? Or what's on my calendar today.
Yeah. So what excites you most about the future in government industry or technology industry?
I want to see where it goes, right? Like, can you remember when the internet was first introduced and we were looking at it and we're dialing up and all this and didn't know really how email, like it was so novel to us and we had to learn a whole new language, a whole new, and I think we're at that place now with AI and the capabilities of technology. And I want to see where it goes. And I think it's super exciting that we get to be part of it. And in some ways, talk with, if it's government consulting, talking with clients and saying, let us help you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's exciting too.
Me too. AI, automation is such a big word. And customers, they know they need to do it. They don't know where to start. How do you prioritize what's important? And that's some of the work that we're doing, is helping them understand, how do you get started? And you just take one little bite.
A little bite.
Right?
Yeah.
Not the whole elephant, just a little bite and then another little bite. But the important thing is to start and evolve. Just start meeting. What are the biggest pains? Can we solve them with automation? What platforms do you have? And then can we automate that? And I think once they start understanding the reason for automation, there's a lot of tasks. One of our customers has 100% of their calls handled by humans. That's the most expensive way to do business, right? And there's probably 30 to 50% of those calls that can be answered by a bot, which, by the way, the general public wants to self-serve.
And they want it quickly, right?
They want it quick. If they got to schedule an appointment, I don't want to talk to a human. I want to just go on and pick my time that works with my schedule. And I'm probably doing it at 2 a.m, right? So people do want to self-serve. If you have to fill out a form, who goes into an office and actually hands a clipboard and fill out a form? I recently went into a dental office and I went, "What? You're handing me a form?" Like, it just was so foreign to me, because I'm like, it shouldn't be, it should just be electronic. You fill it out on the device you have and you're good to go. So
or how about when they hand you the form after you've done the online? You're like, you've got to be kidding me. I just did all this
online and you want me to now do a form. Yeah. So that is pretty exciting. I mean, we can lump it under the word automation, but I think it's when we think about these huge changes in, the last 150 years, the industrial change when the automobile came out, this is so much bigger on such a bigger scale, because automation is learning as well. It's so that it can help do things. I don't start with a blank sheet anymore on anything. If I have an idea, I ask a question. I don't Google anymore. I chat GPT, right? And I've named mine Alfonso. He's Alfonso. So Alfonso helps me, but I just go in and ask my questions. What should I know about this? Tell me what this means. I want to write a news article on this. Give me some points and ideas to start from. So I just don't start with a blank sheet anymore. You just kind of level that. And again, I'm just scratching the surface on what automation means. And I think it really comes down to data and analytics of anything, whether it's personal or professional, business, commercial or government, once you start tapping into the data,
couldn't agree with you more.
then you're able to say, what do I need to change?
Using the data, right?
Yeah.
Not just having it, but
using
it, analyzing it. Yeah.
A lot of people don't look at it. They don't look at, well, why people are calling, or if the company says, how do I interact with my customers? How do I want to interact with my customers? How do I support my customers? That's what I think is getting exciting about technology. And I believe that technology can be a revenue producer, and on the government side, we have so many money problems,
And antiquated systems that with updates become far more efficient and user-friendly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's huge opportunities to make efficiencies through technology in, federal and state government. That's what I'm excited to build my practice for sure. So what's one key takeaway that you'd love the listeners to take away from this conversation?
But I think we might have beat the horse, but people, the value of relationships.
Yeah.
And again, that people want to do business with people that they trust and they like.
Yeah.
Right. And I hope people take that away. I think we got away from it from the pandemic, right? And we have almost a generation that started their careers in absentia.
Yeah.
And with the reintroduction of in-person and offices, it's socializing, things that you and I probably grew up and took up for granted, right? And I think that's the takeaway. People are important and interaction.
Yeah. And I think that I so agree with that. And I'm involved in different networking organizations that connect me with people. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes it is, you just, you take for granted when you have it and you're like, oh, that's where when you stop and go, where did this lead come from? And, oh, it came from this connection, right? I think that I would love for people to be open to those around them of the possibilities, like the possibility of talking to somebody in an airport and then connecting with them and seeing where that goes, so don't just keep your head down, interact with people around you and kind of see where that can go. Yeah. I hope that people do that. But, so how can people connect with you, and maybe follow up if they have any questions?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. If you come to DC,
that's right.
Please, I would love to have coffee, lunch, and my email.
Yeah.
We could probably share that.
Yeah, we'll put it in the caption for sure. But look her up, Rene Nutter on LinkedIn. She's got a great profile. So thank you so much for listening to Symplicity Conversations. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at thesimplepodcast.com to connect and learn more about inspiring leaders like Rene. See you next time.